Now beginning our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1375 with a release and air date of Saturday, July 5, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1375, our Independence Day edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. The League declares ARRL 2025 Field Day a success. We will have our annual wrap-up report. The ARRL represented US amateurs at Ham Radio 2025 in Germany. The Japan Amateur Radio League is preparing for its upcoming 100th anniversary. A new world record is set for copying call signs in CW. Hurricane Response Communications is the focus of upcoming FCC roundtable forums. Logbook of the World is returned to service. Russia is moving forward and constructing new modules for its new space station. A person who climbed the WAMU-FM broadcast tower and stayed on that lofty perch for 3 days has died. AMSAT is testing new blacker-than-black paint on a satellite to help prevent light pollution to astronomers. NASA and the Department of Defense has rehearsed a rescue mission for the Artemis program. Satellite communications company AST, Space Mobile has its eyes on the amateur 70cm band. The FCC issues its decision banning certain telecommunications type acceptance laboratories. The Chinese set a new high-speed data transmission speed from satellites in orbit. And, with the passage of President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, it could mean slower Wi-Fi in the future. We will have all the details coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us about the ARRL incident of May 2024, a year later. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will piles us all into the Wayback Machine and takes us back to 1914, where we find the Radio Club of Hartford in Connecticut, held its first meeting on January 14th that year, and would soon play a larger role than most in amateur radio history. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters facility just outside Albany, New York, and sitting in on this holiday weekend for W2XBS, I'm Ryan, reporting from the United Kingdom.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from along the southern shore of Lake Ontario in Rochester, New York, and wishing everybody in the U.S. a very happy Independence Day weekend, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our bureau in Dallas, Texas, where the forecast for Field Day 2025 is sunny and very hot. I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we're wishing you a very happy 4th of July. I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our news bureau in western Wisconsin, where the cheese is sharp, the brats are sizzling, and the fireworks light up the sky like a 100-watt tube amp at full power. It's the 4th of July. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where the fireworks are flying, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the 4th of July celebrations are over except for the clearing of the luminous clouds of pyrotechnic smoke, I am Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where summer spends its vacations, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, hoping this year it's a short vacation.
Leading off our news this week, tens of thousands of hams are celebrating a successful 2025 ARRL Field Day. For a close-up look at Field Day 2025, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8 IDJ, has this special report.
The largest annual amateur radio event is also one of the most beloved, as shown by countless social media posts. Activity was high with 1,536 sites in the ARRL Field Day locator, and that doesn't even count home stations, portable operations, and other participants. There's a reason that hams look forward to ARRL Field Day, said ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. It is easy to see how much fun people have during the event. Across the country, people come together in town squares, public parks, green spaces, and other locations, all to celebrate the joy of amateur radio and share it with others, she said. On the town green in West Brookfield, Massachusetts, between Springfield and Worcester, the Quabow Valley Amateur Radio Club held its activation front and center in the postcard town. There was a steady line of onlookers visiting the setup that stretched out for several hundred yards. Many of them sat down to try their hand at the GOTA, get on the air station. Aboard the International Space Station, astronaut Johnny Kim, KJ5HKP, was active on the 2-meter band. Social media and YouTube show several clips of hams talking with Kim. James Walker, KC1UYZ, shared a video of his contact with Kim to Instagram and other platforms. KC1UYZ, welcome to the International Space Station, said Kim. A quick rest of the contact was followed by enthusiastic whoops from Walker, who was elated to have talked with an orbiting astronaut. W1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, was active for the event. The station's 3 operating studios were configured as an F3 class station. ARRL Contest Program Manager Paul Bork, N1SFE, reports that nearly 2,500 entries have already been received via the online entry form. We are encouraged by the surge in early submissions, but there's still time to get entries in, he said. If the status of your entry is listed as pending documents, one or more of the required documents still needs to be submitted to complete your entry. Entrants may use the link provided in the confirmation email they received to add additional documents or to modify their entries. And Field Day entries must be received by Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. You can read more about a successful 2025 Field Day at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
On Saturday afternoon and well into the overnight, ARRL Education and Learning Support Specialist Max Friedman, N4ML, was operating alongside Audrey McElroy, KM4BUN. It is always great to help people get W1AW in their logs, he said. Friedman is an experienced contester, but this was his first operating event at the historic station. It is such an honor to operate as W1AW, he said. McElroy was honored as the Bill Pasternak WA6 ITF Memorial Amateur Radio Young Ham of the Year in 2022. She is in Connecticut for an internship in support of her electrical engineering degree, a career that her ham background has inspired. Once again, Field Day entries must be received by Tuesday, July 29th, 2025.
ARRL greeted and served members at the International Amateur Radio Exhibition, Ham Radio 2025, in Friedrichshafen, Germany. The event was held June 27th to the 29th. ARRL has around 6,000 international members, and this is Europe's largest amateur radio event. The theme of the event focused on the latest in remote radio technology. The ARRL delegation enjoyed visiting with radio amateurs from all over the world. Representatives attending included ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, CEO David Minster, NA2AA, Director of Marketing and Innovation Bob Inderbitzen, NQ1R, and Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bert Jonke, W9JJ. A photo album of the event is available on the ARRL Facebook page.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The Federal Communications Commission in the U.S. has received a request from AST Space Mobile to modify an existing license that would allow it to transmit within the amateur radio 70 centimeter band. Specifically, the Texas-based company seeks the use of the 430 to 440 megahertz spectrum to perform telemetry, tracking, and telecommand between ground stations and a constellation of 243 satellites in low Earth, non-geostationary orbit. At the same time, the company is seeking FCC approval for its operation of 248 low Earth orbit, non-geostationary satellites. It is presently licensed for 5. The company's request to use the 70 centimeter band is not insignificant. In 2023, the German regulator, BNetzA, ordered AST Space Mobile to shut its operations when in range of the country, citing harmful interference that violated International Telecommunications Union regulations. In March of 2024, the company said it had updated its constellation's filings with the ITU and the FCC. It also reduced some of its power levels and changed the heights of its orbits, according to the Advanced Television website. AST Space Mobile is a rival of SpaceX, which operates the Starlink satellite constellation, which is testing direct-to-cell with T-Mobile. Earlier this year, AT&T and AST Space Mobile received FCC permission to test direct-to-cellular satellite connectivity. AST Space Mobile is building a satellite constellation-based cellular network that can utilize existing smartphones. The company is based in Midland, Texas, and is publicly traded. Public comments are due to the FCC by July 21st.
On June 12 of 1926, the Japan Amateur Radio League was founded by 37 pioneering members, and a historic message was transmitted to the world. We have the honor of informing that we amateurs in Japan have organized today the Japanese Amateur Radio League. Please QST to all stations. In September of 1927, the station JXAX was authorized. It was the first licensed amateur radio station in Japan. This marked the beginning of a new era. JARL celebrates its 100th anniversary in 2026, and Amateur Radio Japan marks 100 years in 2027. We're entering a special 16-month commemorative period, together with manufacturers, partners, and amateur radio operators across Japan. They're all proud to announce that they're celebrating this milestone and taking their first steps into the next century. Their goal is not to only look back at the past, but to pioneer the future of the culture of amateur radio. Therefore, it will be the 100th anniversary of JARL in June of 2026, and the 100th anniversary of amateur radio in Japan in September of 2027. JARL has decided to celebrate 2 anniversaries for the whole bridging period of 16 months. JARL doesn't intend to celebrate alone, but invites the radio equipment manufacturers, relevant organizations, and radio amateurs nationwide to join the celebration of these important events. The goal is not just to look back and celebrate, but to make this a new starting point towards the future of the irreplaceable culture called amateur radio. Because normal is just boring, this sentence expresses our sincere wish to share the charm of amateur radio, which has fascinated us with new radio amateurs coming into the world of amateur radio. In the past, up till now, many forerunners have developed amateur radio without bounds. The sentence would wish to share the charm of the amateur radio, which has fascinated us. From now forwards into the future, we'll also doubt the common sense and challenge with free inspiration. We'll continue to cherish these amateur radio spirits. These are the upcoming events for the 100th anniversary. Establishment of commemorative logo and message, establishment of commemorative website, the commemorative ceremony, an issue of commemorative booklet, the operation of the commemorative stations, issue of a commemorative award, and finally a commemorative QSO party.
Ham Radio Friedrichshafen theme this year centered around remote radio operations, but strong attendance proved that hams still like to show up in person to greet one another. An estimated 11,600 guests from 52 countries made the annual trip to Germany. Many of them were present as the ham radio fair celebrated a record-breaking moment. A 13-year-old radio amateur from Romania surpassed last year's achievement in high-speed telegraphy. As spectators watched, mostly in silence, Ioannis Skoutaro, Y08YNS, achieved a maximum speed of 1,160 characters per minute for a call sign copy, for a total score of 395,191, landing him in the Guinness Book of World Records. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause only after he had finished and the announcement was made. Ioannis, the son of Lucian, Y08SLC, has been practicing Morse code since the age of 8.
The Federal Communications Commission has finalized its effort to ban the certification of testing laboratories that pose a potential threat to U.S. national security. The FCC issued its report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking, prohibiting entities identified on the Commission's covered list from being authorized as telecommunications certification bodies under the FCC's Equipment Authorization Program. It implements the proposed changes set forth in an NPRM issued by the Commission. The report and order bans any testing lab with direct or indirect ownership of 10% or more by an entity on the covered list. The FCC's covered list includes major wireless equipment manufacturers that, in the Commission's view, pose an unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. The covered list includes major global wireless manufacturers, including Huawei and ZTE, which reportedly have ties to the government of the People's Republic of China and Chinese state-owned enterprises. In the companion NPRM, the FCC is seeking comments on plans to expand its Equipment Authorization Program prohibitions to include entities in addition to those on the covered list that could adversely affect telecommunication certification bodies or test labs' trustworthiness or otherwise undermine the public's confidence. The Commission is also seeking input on whether it should consider revising its current post-market surveillance rules, policies, or guidance to anticipate such concerns. The FCC's report and order and NPRM detailing its changes to telecommunication certification body certification rules are available on the FCC's webpage.
The Federal Communications Commission has scheduled a live online roundtable that it hopes will help communicators, public safety workers, and power companies improve collaboration during this hurricane season in the United States. The Hurricane Season Resiliency Roundtable is taking place on Monday, July 7th, and will be conducted by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Advance registration is required. The program, which can be attended in person or via a live stream, will take place in 3 panel sessions. Challenges to response and recovery of power and communications outages in the aftermath of a hurricane will be the first topic covered. Collaboration will be explored in the second session, current government, intra-industry, and cross-industry partnerships. The final session will look at planning ahead. It is called the Advanced Preparation Frameworks for Power and Communications. The roundtable begins at 9:30 a.m. at FCC headquarters in Washington, D.C.
For decades now, the race to the moon has always symbolized one of the biggest challenges in global space-based competitions. The Russian EME, or Earth-Moon-Earth contest, doesn't use any spacecraft, however, just VHF radio communications, and it's a race to the moon that stirred interest worldwide for years. Get ready for the second round of the Russian EME contest, hosted by the Union of Radio Amateurs of Russia. The 6th annual international competition kicked off with its first round on this last weekend of June. Now, competitors are preparing for the final round coming up on July 26th and 27th. While the first round was held on 144 MHz, 432 MHz, 5.6 GHz, and 24 GHz, the second round will see amateurs trying for Earth-Moon-Earth QSOs utilizing 1296 MHz, 2.3 GHz, and 10 GHz. Once again, hams will be making use of CW, single sideband, and the digital modes. To see the results of last year's competition, visit eme.srr.ru/results.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
The 24th USA Radio Orienteering Championships were held June 19th through the 22nd, 2025. John Ross, Kilo Delta 8, India Delta Juliet, is here with a close-up look at the championships.
The event was hosted by the Backwoods Orienteering Club, BOK, at the Morrow Mountain State Park in Albemarle, North Carolina, and it drew about 30 athletes from across the United States and Canada. Radio orienteering is also known as amateur radio direction finding, or ARDF. There were 4 World Championship-style races: foxering, sprint, 2-meter classic, and 80-meter classic. The elite results: Edward Nasbolin from Massachusetts took the unofficial overall crown, dominating the men's field, winning the sprint, 2-meter, and 80-meter classics, and adding silver in foxering. Gilligay Fala from North Carolina took foxering gold and finished second in the 2-meter and 80-meter classics. And in the W35 division for women ages 35 and older, Lori Huberman from the California Bay Orienteering Club captured foxering and sprint, while Aaron Hammer from North Carolina sprinted to 2-meter and 80-meter classic gold and added silver in other formats. For the youth, Junior Tiger Zhao claimed a perfect 4-event sweep in the M16 for men 16 and under, and teammates Anastasia Aforkin, W16 for women 16 and under, and Adelia Shazrath Craig, W19, that's for women 19 and younger, also took golds, some with times that would have placed competitively in older divisions. The strong depth in youth, W55 and M50 and M60 division bodes well for Team USA at the 2025 IARU World Championships to be held in Lithuania this August. I'm John Ross, KD8I DJ.
Other standouts in this year's event were Nadia Charlot, Kilo Oscar 4, Alpha Delta Victory, extended her women's age 55 and older legacy with victories in both 2-meter and 80-meter classics. The men ages 60 and older class became a two-way battle between Evgeny Danilov, Kilo Quebec 4, Quebec Yankee Zulu, and Nikolai Medjevoy traded wins and podium spots across all 4 events, with Medjevoy topping the sprint and 80-meter classic races, while Danilov took 2-meter classic and foxering gold. In the senior competition class, every entrant in the M70, or men 70 and older, and W75, women 75 and older, divisions completed at least 3 of the 4 demanding courses. Their steady performances and obvious enjoyment underscored the value of adding senior categories to future championships. The complete results of these championships, available at the Backwoods Orienting Club website, will be used for selecting the U.S. team. Learn more about amateur radio direction finding on the ARRL ARDF page.
A person apparently scaled the 321-foot broadcast tower that services WAMU 88.5, the Washington, D.C. area's national public radio news station, on this past Tuesday afternoon. D.C. police said they had negotiators on the scene of a barricade situation that was confined to the communications tower on the 4400 block of Massachusetts Avenue Northwest, which is located on American University's campus. American University owns WAMU's operating license. A police spokesperson called the situation still ongoing. American University warned the campus community to stay away from the area in the email, but said there was no safety concern to the AU community. It appeared police had the area secured from multiple entrances by the evening, and there was a drone flying close to the tower. Police told members of the public to move out of line of sight of the tower. An eyewitness at the scene saw a figure partway up the tower. WAMU's radio signal was briefly affected on Tuesday afternoon, according to Chief Advancement Officer Leslie Van Sant, who said the station had powered down to the tower to support the emergency response. The public radio station maintains a backup broadcasting arrangement in Virginia. We continue to monitor services for disruptions as we recognize the importance of access to news and information for the local community during this busy time, WAMU General Manager Erica Pauley Hayes said in a statement. WAMU's tower is a 321-foot tall steel structure and the largest FM broadcast antenna in the nation's capital. The public radio station leases space on the tower to multiple other local radio stations. It was not immediately clear if those station signals were also affected. In an update just released, it was noted that the individual who had climbed WAMU's broadcast tower died this past Friday morning. American University confirmed his death in a statement to WAMU, and MPD has ruled it a suicide. The area around the tower remains an active investigation site, and people are asked to avoid the area.
NASA and the Department of Defense teamed up June 11th and 12th to simulate emergency procedures that they would use to rescue the Artemis II crew in the event of a launch emergency. The simulations, which took place off the coast of Florida and were supported by launch and flight control teams, are preparing NASA to send 4 astronauts around the moon and back next year as part of the agency's first crewed Artemis mission. The team rehearsed procedures that they would use to rescue the crew during an abort of NASA's Orion spacecraft while the Space Launch System rocket is still on the launch pad, as well as during ascent to space. A set of test mannequins and a representative version of Orion, called the Crew Module Test Article, were used during the tests. The launch team at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, flight controllers and mission control at the agency's Johnson Space Center in Houston, as well as the mission management team, all worked together, exercising their integrated procedures for these emergency scenarios.
Russia is planning to press ahead on the country's Russian Orbital Station, or ROS, following the demise of the International Space Station in 2030. At that time, the first ROS modules are to be lofted. It will become the world's first drone platform equipped with robots for its maintenance, said the first Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Denis Manturov. This is a patented solution of the Russian Federation. Testing the technology will allow us to apply this format to our Luna program, he said. We will continue to increase the number of communication devices in near-Earth, geostationary, and highly elliptical orbits. Thus, we expect to cover the entire territory of the country, including the Arctic, with stable communication channels by 2030, he emphasized. Also in news from Russia, on June 6th, the Iranian embassy in Moscow reported a pivotal meeting between their ambassador and the CEO of Roscosmos, the Russian State Space Corporation, where discussions centered on the joint production of satellites, marking a significant step in deepening bilateral space cooperation.
A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carrying 70 payloads for a diverse range of customers will be launched. The mission, known as the Transporter 14, is the latest in SpaceX's dedicated rideshare program, which provides cost-effective launch services for small satellites and experimental spacecraft. Among the payloads was a special memorial capsule containing cremated human remains and DNA samples. The exploration company's new 9X reusable spacecraft is flying this commemorative mission in cooperation with Celestis, a company specializing in space burial. If all goes according to plan, NYX will circle the Earth 2 or 3 times before recovering, carrying remains and DNA from 150 people. The launch has also delivered an array of microsats, CubeSats, and re-entry capsule. 2 amateur radio satellites were also hitching a ride. Paris T2, a 3U CubeSat, was developed by the Taiwan Space Agency and carries a crossband voice repeater and APRS digipeater. It provides voice communications on uplink of 145.980 MHz and downlink at 435.250 MHz. Along with APRS packet services on 145.825 MHz. Students and amateur operators worldwide will have access to the satellite's unencrypted telemetry and educational outreach tools. Indonesia's RIDU Sat-1 also joined the manifest. This is a 1U CubeSat and uses amateur radio frequencies for educational training and communications. It features a VHF APRS payload on 145.825 MHz and a telemetry beacon on 145.925. The rocket's first stage landed successfully on the drone ship named, of course, I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean about 8.5 minutes after liftoff. It marked the 26th flight and landing for this booster, edging closer to SpaceX's reuse record of 28 flights. Meanwhile, the upper stage will spend nearly 2 hours deploying the payload into precise orbits, continuing a mission series that began with Transporter 1's record-setting 143 satellite launch in 2021.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, age 8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the DX Mentor YouTube channel, the text of this will be included in the show notes. You won't have to remember calls, dates, URLs, or other details. You can just check the show notes. If you've been with me over a year, you know that starting in July, I like to start counting down the days until Christmas. So at this time, we have 175 days until Christmas, plus or minus a few depending upon when you're listening or watching this. And what that really means is we're actually closer to Christmas 2025 than we were Christmas 2024. Each week, I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. So here's what you should find QRV the next time you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at the dxmentor@gmail.com and I'll make it happen. Todd, Alpha Fox 4 Charlie Zulu, is QRV from Guatemala as Tango Golf 9 stroke Alpha Fox 4 Charlie Zulu until July 9th. In his spare time, he will be on 40 through 10 meters, mainly on FT8 and FT4, possibly some single sideband. And you can QSL him via LOTW. N0UI, Tim, is QRV as Zulu Delta 7 Tango India Mike from St. Helena until July 13th. He is operating on 40 meters through 10 meters, looking for 6-meter QSOs also if conditions warrant. Modes of operations are CW, sideband, and possibly RTTY. This operation features a single op, low power, unassisted CW only entry in the IARU HF World Championship. Outside of the contest, operations will follow holiday style, focusing on CW and single sideband. RTTY capability will also be available for potential use. QSOs can be confirmed via LOTW or N0UI. Eric, KV1J, is QRV from St. Miquelon until July 14th. He is operating as Fox Papa stroke KV1 Juliet. He is emphasizing activity on 6 meters and the higher HF bands, primarily single sideband and FT8, FT4 with some CW. Eric also plans to be on the air for the IARU contest. His QSOs will be uploaded daily to LOTW and Clublog, and you can QSL direct via the Bureau or to his call via OQRS. From the UK's sovereign base areas on Cyprus, Zulu Charlie 4 Mike Kilo will be operated by Golf 0 Kilo Oscar Mike Adrian. Adrian says that he will be QRV, quote, sometime on the 8th of July and will break down the station in the evening of the 15th of July. He will be running 100 watts to a hex beam for 20 through 6 meters and an end-fed half wave, which will give him 80 and 40 meter coverage, end quote. His QTH is in the village of Ypsonis, and the grid square is KM64LQ. AB, A Alpha Bravo 1 Fox, is now in Armenia for his Echo Kilo stroke Alpha Bravo 1 Fox operation. His home QTH is currently Greenbelt, Maryland, and he often operates at the WA3NAN NASA Goddard Flight Center. In Armenia, he is operating from a town called Stepvanavan, which is in grid LN21EA, the same location as his previous operations from Armenia. As usual, there will be special call signs during the big 3-week-long Tour de France bicycle race. The first to look for is Tango Mike 112 Tango Delta Fox, with operator F8 Golf Zulu at the controls until July 26th. The second is Tango Mike 25 TDF from the Radio Club Amaltra until July 26th. The third is Tango Mike 59 TDF. During the IARU HF World Championship, July 12th and 13th, members of the 3 Victor 8 Sugar Sugar Radio Club Station of Tunisian Scouts and 3 Victor 8 Lima Lima Giovanni will be teaming up at the Association de Radio Amateurs of Tunisia headquarters station. They will be using both call signs during the contest. It looks like Tango 2 Tuvalu will be becoming rarer in the distant future as, quote, residents of Tuvalu seek escape to Australia as the island continues to sink. I first heard about this from Ralph, K9ZO, in one of our podcasts when he had been there a couple years apart, and he could see in the roadways that connect some of the smaller islands that the ocean was rising. So this is a little bit scary, of course, and I hope they all make it off. But if you need Tango 2, you better get it now. And you can search on Tuvalu sinking, which I did, and I was able to find articles on this. It looks like Juliet X-ray Jan Man will be activated for the first time since 2022. Lima Bravo 2 Oscar Golf Peter is currently on a work assignment on Jan Man and expects to stay for some weeks with plans to get on the air in his spare time as Juliet X-ray stroke Lima Bravo 2 Oscar Golf. Jan Man has not been on the air since 2022 and currently ranks number 56 on Club Log's DXCC Most Wanted list. Peter has, quote, no specific schedule for ham radio, but says that he is set up for 40 meters, 20 meters, and some higher bands on sideband and FT8. And you can QSL this to Lima Bravo 2 Oscar Golf. The special call sign, Sierra November 92 LOT, active until July 31st, commemorates the 92nd anniversary of the ill-fated flight of Lithuanian pilots Stepanas Darius and Stasas Girnis. On July 15th of 1933, they attempted a nonstop flight from New York City to Kanauas in a small airplane. After crossing the Atlantic Ocean, they crashed on July 17th, just 400 miles short of their final destination. And this special event station can be QSL'd via Sugar Papa 1 Papa Mike Yankee. We are pleased to announce the Dave Coulter Memorial Youth DX Adventure plans to participate in a DX adventure to Curacao operating as PJ2Y on July 17th to the 22nd. Quote, the Caribbean Contesting Consortium Super Contest Station, which is PJ2T, is hosting us for the 4th time. We look forward to seeing our host and friend Uli, Delta Lima 8 Oscar Bravo, Quebec. This time we will be operating as the DX and as a special event station. Operation by the Young Ops will be about 4 days and sometimes around the clock. We anticipate several thousand QSOs on most bands. This trip is sponsored by the Dayton Amateur Radio Association, or DARA, DX Engineering, the QC Worldwide Foundation, along with several other clubs and individuals. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Tom, November Yankee Zero Victor, is the guest. Tom is a great guest, a fantastic operator, a polished contester, and a smooth DX operator. However, none of these were the reasons we had Tom on as our guest. It all has to do with the Pacific, missing airplanes, 19,000 feet of water. Well, you're just going to have to check it out and find out what the deal is. It was really a lot of fun. If you're interested in DX Podcast and YouTube DX, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities we have going on. So finally, for our contest updates, I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests every year that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that they may otherwise not be able to get. The next contest that you can use to work an all-time new one or to fill a band slot is the IARU HF World Championship. This runs from 1200 Zulu on July 12th to 1200 Zulu on July 13th. This is a very popular contest and really a lot of fun. Check out the ARRL webpage and search on IARU contest for more details. Let me know if you participate and how you do. Please send me an email if you need details on this topic or anything else that I mentioned. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Just over a year ago, the ARRL, the American Radio Relay League, the peak body for amateur radio in the United States and one of the oldest of such organizations, experienced an incident. During the weeks following, the ARRL was tight-lipped about the extent of the incident, and most amateurs only really noticed that services were offline or slow to respond. After months of delay and disinformation, the ARRL finally revealed that it was the subject of a ransomware attack, and that it had paid $1 million ransom. It went on to blame the authorities for its silence. Mind you, it didn't tell me personally. It made public statements on its website. Similarly, when I specifically contacted the ARRL to discover what information of mine it held, and what the status of that information was, the ARRL responded that I should refer to its public statements. It continued to state that my information was not compromised, since it only lived in LOTW, the Logbook of the World, the system it uses to coordinate the verification of amateur radio contacts, which are used to distribute awards like the DXCC and Worked or whatever. Imagine my surprise when I received an email this week sent from memberlist@arrl.org to my non-amateur radio email address. I confirmed with several amateurs that they too received this email. Informative, to a point, but likely well beyond anything intended by its author. It stated that LOTW was being updated with associated downtime, incidentally, inexplicably, coinciding with the 2025 ARRL Field Day, and it, quote, will be fully migrated to the cloud, end quote. It went on to solicit donations. It made no reference whatsoever to the ransomware attack. There's a lot hidden in that email. Although the attack last year was linked to the outage associated with LOTW, the ARRL has continued to claim that the LOTW data was not impacted by the ransomware attack. But the email reveals that the system is being migrated to the cloud. In other words, right now, it's not in the cloud. Which begs the question, where is the server infrastructure for LOTW today? And, more importantly, where was it a year ago when its systems were compromised? From a public post by Dave, Alpha Alpha 6 Yankee Quebec, dated the 2nd of February 2021, in response to a message about a January LOTW committee meeting, we know that the LOTW server, quote, now employs the current version of an SAP database engine, end quote. A month before that, Dave wrote another informative email that indicated that 105,000 call signs submitted logs to LOTW in the last 1,826 days, or the 5 years between 2016 and 2021. There were logs from 21,000 call signs in the week prior to that January post. In all, according to Dave, there were 153,246 call signs who submitted contacts to LOTW. The LOTW committee meeting minutes are no longer available from the ARRL website, but I have a copy. The document states that there were 1.2 billion contacts entered into LOTW. Big number, right? The next line tells us that this resulted in 262 million QSO records. I wonder what happened to the other billion records. This activity was generated by 139,000 users using 200,000 certificates. For context, every VK call sign automatically comes with an AX call sign, but LOTW requires that you separately register each with its own certificate. As someone who has been playing with databases since the 1980s, I can tell you that LOTW is a tiny database. For comparison, the Whisper database is an order of magnitude larger, not to mention more active. I have no insight into the business rules within the LOTW database, but the fact that updates are being processed in batches and that it regularly has delays indicates a level of complexity that I cannot account for. As an aside, the LOTW committee document lists 10 members. Dave is not one of those listed. It makes me wonder who else has access to this database. Note that I have no reason to believe that Dave's information is questionable, nor that he has access that he shouldn't. He was, after all, a member of the LOTW committee from 2013 until 2017 when the ARRL removed all development resources from the LOTW. I'm asking who else has access, and why. While we're here, who has been doing maintenance and updates on this system over the past 7 years? Moving on. The database for LOTW contains information from amateurs all over the planet, including those in Europe, where the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, enacted in 2016, is extremely strict on the security and disclosure of personal data, with very heavy penalties for breaches. The GDPR requires notifications be sent within 72 hours of a breach, and that an organization must designate a data protection officer. I wonder who has that role at the ARRL, and I wonder if they told anyone. Did any European amateurs receive personal notification from the ARRL about their data? I know I didn't. My first activation of LOTW was in 2013, now 12 years ago. I received certificate expiry messages in 2016 and 2019. Since then, there have been no such messages. That's unsurprising since I stopped using LOTW once I discovered just how broken it was. Don't get me started on portable and QRP variants of my call sign. My care factor is low as to when I last actually used it, since attempting to dig up that information would take considerable effort, but I can guarantee that it was before 28 October 2019, when the last certificate expired. You might come to this point and ask yourself, why am I digging into this at all? Let me ask you some questions in addition to those I've already mentioned. SAP, the database system which apparently runs LOTW, had 254 CVEs, or Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, listed in 2020 alone. It continues to have exploits. When was SAP updated, and is it up to date today? Is it credible that LOTW wasn't compromised during the ransomware attack? Does the ARRL know this for sure, or did it just not detect the compromise? We know that LOTW was down during the incident, and according to the Uptime Robot Service, showed outages on the 14th of May 2024, but we still don't know exactly when this attack started. As you might know, the ARRL is also the headquarters for the IARU International Secretariat, the administration body for the global representation of our hobby. It presumably shares infrastructure with the ARRL, but at no point in the past year have we been advised of the impact of this breach to the IARU. What information is stored in LOTW, and why has the ARRL continued to ignore requests for disclosing the specific information it holds on the users of that system? I know for sure that it knows my call signs and my email address. I also know for sure that it required identity documents to prove my identity and right to use those call sign. I have been told in writing that LOTW never deletes anything. So what does it store, and can I delete all my records, and if so, how? Why did I receive an update about the upgrade for LOTW when I'm clearly not an active user of the system? The member list at ARRL.org is used for all manner of services, including the propagation updates and the 3 other ARRL bulletins. In other words, this address is used for a myriad of messaging. Is this information stored in a database, and if so, where is this database? Was it compromised? What information is stored in that database? Are my details in that database? Are yours? While discussing this LOTW update email with other amateurs, I was informed by one amateur that even after they stopped being a member of the ARRL, as a direct result of the ransomware attack and the discontinuation of the delivery of QST magazine they paid for, the ARRL continued to send regular email updates as if they were still a current member. Where is that data stored, and how are the ARRL not considered a source of spam? While we're exploring the blurred lines between being a member of the ARRL and not, Why did it send the update about the incident via email to its members on 21 August 2024 and update the website a day later? And why did it not send that same email to me and every other amateur directly? Why does the ARRL continue to ignore its obligations in relation to the personal information it clearly and demonstrably holds? The GDPR has been a fact of life since 2016. It's not optional if you store data for European citizens, but the ARRL doesn't even mention it on their privacy policy page. Did European users receive specific notification about the breach, now a year ago, which clearly the ARRL has both the capacity and obligation to? Has the GDPR been invoked by European amateurs? Should it? You could attempt to explain all this as incompetence or mismanagement. That's a response, but it doesn't pass the sniff test. For example, implementing SAP is a non-trivial process. I have over 40 years professional experience in the ICT field, and I'm not sure I would stick up my hand to have a go at doing this. Mind you, if I did, there's no way I'd choose SAP. I'd find an open source solution, but that's just me, not to mention that SAP license costs are significant. This in an organization asking users for donations. The thing is, we're talking about a system that's now at least 22 years old, running in an organization that's been around for over a century. An organization that deals in regulation and legalese at the very foundation of its existence. In other words, there's a massive amount of legal and technical skill and history available within the organization, but we're still seeing this level of at best questionable, at worst illegal behavior. I'm not a member of the ARRL and nothing I've seen to date makes me want to give them any of my money. If you are, perhaps you should be asking some questions. If you're a citizen of Europe, perhaps you should start asking some questions about your data. If you pay money to your own peak body, then you should ask it to find out what happened at the IARU International Secretariat during the attack. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Welcome to the fourth segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. So sit back and enjoy this, the next of many chapters of ham radio history. Getting organized. A growing number of clubs across the country, especially in and around cities, continued to spur interest in amateur radio. One of them, the Radio Club of Hartford in Connecticut, held its first meeting on 14 January 1914 and would soon play a larger role than most in amateur radio history. Local businessman and engineer Hiram Percy Maxim was among the group in Hartford that evening. Already a prominent radio amateur, he operated a 1-kilowatt station with call sign 1WH, capable of reaching 100 miles or more under good conditions. An astounding distance for an amateur, and about the best that the state-of-the-art and legal restrictions made possible. Seeing the limitations more than the accomplishment, he began to experiment with relaying messages, one station to the next, a technique used to extend range that had been practiced by ships and land-based stations alike for some time. Beyond the simple idea and its practical use, Maxim saw it as a driving principle around which to build a collaborative national organization, something he had believed necessary ever since witnessing the machinations leading up to the 1912 radio law. On 6 April, he presented his ideas to a receptive audience at the club, which then voted to establish the American Radio Relay League, a name Maxim had thought up as he pondered the idea driving to his office one day. The club organized a committee to work on the idea. Maxim, and 18-year-old club secretary Clarence Tuska wrote letters to all the active amateurs with capable stations known to them and the club. They enclosed a form that correspondents could use to describe their stations and register for the Relay League. So great was the response, surprising even Maxim and Tuska, that by summer they had already demonstrated several relay routes in the Northeast. The list of registered relay stations grew to over 200 by August, spread across the U.S. and Canada. League membership, though free of charge, was open only to qualified stations capable of effective relay operation. In October, the club published their list of amateur stations and sold it for 50 cents, along with message pads and maps showing station locations, the first call book. More than simply a roster, the list had a practical intent. It was the first routing table, too. Whether you originated a message or were relaying one, you would use the map to help determine which stations were located in the general direction of the message's destination and try to send it to one of those next. Maxim began working to establish the League's visibility with the government and helped some amateurs obtain special licenses to operate on 425 meters for message relaying, his main objective. To prevent interference to maritime communications, only those stations located away from the coast were granted special licenses. The government permitted them to operate on the longer wavelength under the condition that no interference resulted, and issued them special call signs with suffixes beginning with X or Z. Maxim's station call changed to 1ZM, and Tuska's became 1ZT. The number of relay stations continued to grow steadily, as did League participation and message volume, with many stations now handling messages as their primary or sole on-the-air activity. By early 1915, it was becoming clear that the League had taken on a life of its own, with a mission that extended well beyond what made sense for a local club. So in February, after discussion at club meetings, Maxim, Tuska, and club president David L. Moore resigned and incorporated the American Radio Relay League as an entirely separate entity. Maxim personally repaid the Hartford Club for expenditures it had made in establishing the League. In addition to selling the list of stations package, the League began asking for a voluntary membership fee of 50 cents per year. The second edition of the list of amateur stations in March contained 600 entries. By the end of the year, after steadily improving their stations in spite of the new restrictions imposed 3 years earlier, amateurs were once again outperforming many government and commercial stations. They had crawled back up from the slapdown of the 1912 radio law, due in part to being better organized around a shared goal. The organization was comprised of a very effective mixture of individuals, a few mature professionals, exemplified by Maxim, teamed with very many more members in their teens and 20s, like Tuska, all sharing an intense passion for the science, art, and practice of radio communication. As serious wireless bugs, they were equals. Age was of no consequence. They now needed a better way to keep their operation coordinated. Clearly, a newsletter or magazine was the answer, but it had to be self-supporting, since the League itself had no funds to speak of. Included in this material is a quote from the following: Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 meters and down, the American Radio Relay League, Incorporated, 1936, page 40. With thanks to W2PA Chris Cadella for his kind permission for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The campaign to secure AM radio's future in the U.S. vehicle dashboards has cleared another key hurdle. With 12 additional lawmakers signing on late Friday, the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act now holds 228 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, including 2 non-voting delegates, surpassing the simple majority threshold of 218. The House bill, led by Representatives Gus Bilirakis from Florida and Frank Pallone of New Jersey, has seen a rapid expansion of bipartisan support since May. The Senate version of the bill advanced out of committee earlier this year and now holds 61 co-sponsors, enough to clear a filibuster if brought to a floor vote. The legislation would require all automakers to include AM radio receivers in new passenger vehicles sold in the U.S., framing the feature as a public safety necessity tied to the country's emergency alert system. Supporters have emphasized AM radio's role in FEMA's integrated public alert and warning system, which relies on 77 high-powered primary entry point AM stations capable of reaching over 90% of Americans, even if internet or cellular networks fail during disasters. Despite its growing roster of supporters, the House measure remains bottled up in committee. The bill must still pass through the Energy and Commerce Committee before becoming eligible for a full House vote. It currently sits in the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. In the Senate, scheduling remains uncertain. Majority Leader John Thune has yet to set a date for consideration, with other priorities crowding the chamber's summer calendar. Budget reconciliation talks and rising tensions with Iran have taken center stage in Congress. Lawmakers are expected to work through this week before adjourning for the July 4th holiday, leaving only a short window for legislative movement ahead of the August recess.
The 2025 Moon Day, a space-themed public STEM event, will take place on Saturday, July 19th at the Frontiers of Flight Museum at Love Field in Dallas. Held each year close to the end of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the event features hands-on science exhibits and activities for all ages. Moon Day runs from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, with setup beginning at 8 a.m. Central Daylight Time. AMSAT will once again be represented at the event by AMSAT Ambassador Thomas Schuessler, N5HYP, along with several North Texas satellite enthusiasts. They will engage with the public, including many young people, on topics such as satellite orbits, the International Space Station, and amateur radio in space. Exhibits will include the AMSAT Fox CubeSat engineering model and the CubeSat simulator, and the team hopes to demonstrate a few live satellite passes during the day. Tom is seeking additional AMSAT volunteers from the North Texas area to help staff exhibit the table. The AMSAT booth will be located next to the Dallas Amateur Radio Club exhibit, providing opportunities for great conversations with fellow hams as well as curious families. Volunteers receive free museum admission and lunch. Anyone interested in helping for part or the entire day is encouraged to email Tom at n5hyp@arrl.net. More information about the event is available at flightmuseum.com/events/Moon
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Full ARRL members in the Pacific, Rocky Mountain, Southeastern, Southwestern, and West Gulf divisions have the opportunity to choose a director and vice director to represent those divisions for 3-year terms beginning January 1st, 2026. ARRL is governed by its board of directors. A voting director is chosen by ballot by the full licensed ARRL members in each of its 15 divisions. Vice directors who serve in the absence of the director at a board meeting and succeed to the position of director should a vacancy occur are chosen at the same time. Elections are held in 5 divisions per year. It only takes 10 full members in a division to nominate a candidate for either office. The eligibility of nominees for the position of ARRL Director and Vice Director will be reviewed by the Ethics and Elections Committee, composed of 3 directors not subject to election this year. They are Scott Yonali, N8SY, Brent Walls, N9BA, and Tom Frenay, K1KI. A nominee must be at least 21 years old and must have been licensed and a full member of ARRL for a continuous term of at least 4 years immediately preceding nomination. Each nominee must provide information concerning their employment, ownership, investment, interests, and other financial arrangements to ensure compliance with the Conflict of Interest policy available at www.arrl.org/general-information. The qualifications for director and vice director are identical. All the powers of the director are transferred to the vice director in the event of the director's resignation, recall, removal outside the division, inability to serve, or death. The nomination procedure is as follows. Step 1. Obtain official nomination petition forms. Starting July 1st, any full member residing in a division where there is an election may request an official nominating petition package in writing, either by letter or via email to execadmin@arrl.org. The request must reach the ARRL Secretary no later than noon Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, August 8, 2025. If you are seriously considering running or nominating someone to run, please don't wait until the last minute to request the forms. The deadline for submitting a completed petition form is just 1 week later. Step 2. Complete the questionnaire and obtain signatures. Only the official form may be used. The candidate must complete page 1, providing the information required to determine eligibility, certifying its accuracy, and agreeing to assume the office if elected. To be valid, a nominating petition must name the candidate and must bear the signatures of 10 full members of the division. Step 3. Submit the petition form. The completed form must reach the Secretary no later than noon Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, August 15, 2025. The submission may be made by electronic transmission of images or facsimile, provided that, upon request, the original documents are received by the Secretary within 7 days of the request. A person who is nominated for both director and vice director may choose to decline the nomination for director. Otherwise, the nomination for director will stand, and that for vice director will be void. On Monday, August 18, 2025, the Secretary will notify each candidate of the name and call sign of each other candidate for the same office. Candidates will then have until Friday, August 29, 2025, to submit a 300-word statement and a photograph if they desire those to be made available to voters in accordance with instructions that will be supplied. If there is only one eligible candidate for an office, he or she will be declared elected by the Ethics and Elections Committee. If there is more than one eligible candidate for an office, the full members in that division who are in good standing as of September 10, 2025, will have the opportunity to cast ballots. Official voting documents will be mailed to members who are eligible to vote no later than October 1, 2025. Votes must be electronically cast, or completed paper ballots must be received at the designated P.O. Box in the envelope provided by noon Eastern Time on Friday, November 21, 2025. The candidate receiving the most votes will be declared the winner that day. A full member who is residing temporarily outside his or her home division, including overseas, may arrange to vote in the home division by notifying the Secretary before September 6, 2025, giving their current mailing address as reflected in the ARRL membership records, and the reason why another division is considered home. Members with overseas military addresses should take special note of this provision. In the absence of information receiving to the contrary, ballots will be sent to them based on their postal addresses. The incumbent directors and vice directors, respectively in the 5 divisions in which elections will be held this year, are: in the Pacific, John Litz, NZ6Q; Rocky Mountain, Jeff Ryan, K0RM, and Dan Grady, N2SRK. Southeastern, Mickey Baker, N4MB, and Andy Miluzzi, KK4LWR. Southwestern, Dick Norton, N6AA, and Ned Stearns, AA7A. And West Gulf, John Robert Stratton, N5AUS, and Lee Cooper, W5LHC.
In a development that some observers say could someday replace satellites' reliance on RF, scientists in China are claiming that they have developed a transmission method using minimal laser power. The method is known as AO-MDR synergy and utilizes a 2-watt laser. Scientists at Peking University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences have said that by employing this technique, they recently accomplished a 1 gigabit per second data transmission to Earth from a geostationary satellite. Researchers praise the development, adding that it addresses a common challenge for satellite downlinks, the distortion caused by atmospheric turbulence. The developers of this process said that AO-MDR addresses this by stabilizing the laser signal even when it faces atmospheric turbulence. The technique combines adaptive optics and mode diversity reception.
The Pan-Hellenic celebration of Maritime Week is being revived this year. Special event station Sierra Zulu 2 Victor Echo Lima Oscar Sierra was activated June 29, 2025, and will be in operation until Sunday, July 6th, under the auspices of the Hellenic Navy General Staff and the headquarters of the Hellenic Coast Guard. The Radio Amateurs Union of Northern Greece is participating in the celebrations by reviving amateur radio activity aboard the historic destroyer Velos, operating from the ship's original radio room on multiple HF bands and in various modes including single sideband, CW, and digital. Maritime Week is a long-standing Greek institution dedicated to promoting the multifaceted role of the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Merchant Marine as the key pillars of national security and economic development. The event underscores the timeless relationship of the Greek people with the sea, cultivating a nautical spirit and love for the maritime world. Special commemorative diplomas will be issued to every amateur radio station that completes at least one successful QSO, regardless of band or mode. For more information, please visit the official QRZ page for Sierra Zulu 2 Victor Echo Lima Oscar Sierra.
The ham radio community is grieving the loss of Roger Smallwood, November 8, Echo Kilo Golf, President of Operations at R&L Electronics in Ohio for more than 40 years. Roger, who had cancer, became a silent key on Saturday, June 28th. In his online obituary, customers and longtime friends alike recalled his friendly, easygoing manner, his helpfulness, and his much-anticipated appearances at Dayton Hamvention. Many recall the family business he helped build, which earned the popular nickname The Candy Store for its assortment of amateur radio equipment. Roger was 55.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
It is time for this month's Volunteer Monitoring Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the current activity report of the VM program. A Traffic and Awards Net operating on 7.185 MHz was issued an advisory for deliberately starting the net on top of the Andaman Island D-Expedition, VU4AX. A case involving an Alabama station continuously calling another station on 20-meter FT8 was resolved informally and the robotic one-way transmissions stopped. Technician operators in Texas and Michigan were issued advisories for operating FT8 on 40 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on that band. A technician operator in Florida was issued an advisory for FT8 operation on 15 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on that band. A technician operator in Iowa was issued an advisory for FT8 operation on 20 meters, a band on which technicians have no privileges. A commendation was issued to a station in Colorado for exemplary net control operation on 14.295 MHz on February 16, 2025, from 1600 to 1800 UTC, in which he demonstrated exceptional courtesy and efficiency in checking in stations under crowded band conditions. A commendation was issued to an operator in North Carolina for exceptional CW, QRP operation on 7.025 MHz from 0100 to 0120 UTC on April 5, 2025. The operator demonstrated exceptional courtesy and efficiency in making contacts with numerous operators under crowded band conditions. A question and answer session was presented in person to the Mount Airy VHF Radio Club in Mount Airy, Pennsylvania. A virtual VM program was presented to the Bella Vista Amateur Radio Club in Rogers, Arkansas. The totals for monitoring in this report were 1,480 hours on HF frequencies and 1,849 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,329 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. There are 2 new amateur satellites that were launched by SpaceX on June 25th. Parus T2 is a 3U CubeSat from the Taiwan Space Agency with support from National Formosa University. There is an APRS digipeater on 145.825 MHz, along with an FM voice repeater with an uplink on 145.980 MHz and a 67 Hz tone. The downlink is 435.250 MHz. It should be noted that this satellite's telemetry will be unencrypted, making it available for use by students and hams. They will also have educational outreach tools. The second amateur satellite is Indonesia's RIDU-SAT, a 1U CubeSat with an APRS digipeater on 145.825 MHz and telemetry beacon on 145.925 MHz. If you participated in the ARRL Field Day this year or the AMSAT Satellite Field Day, be sure to get your logs in by July 29th. Follow the ARRL rules for submitting to them. For AMSAT Field Day, you can find the submission sheet and instructions at amsat.org. Click on Events, then AMSAT Field Day. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's propagation and solar weather forecast for the near term. Solar activity has been at low levels for the past 24 hours. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. Solar activity is generally expected to be minor through July 4th. The 10.7 centimeter flux for July 5th will be 120, it will be at 125 on July 6th and 7th, and 135 on July 8th and hold steady through July 10th. There is a chance that minor to moderate radio blackouts due to isolated M-class flare activity will persist through July 6th. Solar wind parameters reflected weakening negative polarity coronal whole high-speed stream influence. A trend towards a more nominal solar wind environment is anticipated by July 3rd. The solar wind environment on July 1st was steady. The solar wind speed ranged from 546 to 415 km per second, and is on a declining trend. A coronal hole may connect with Earth by late July 3rd to enhance the solar wind speed. However, this feature may be too high a latitude to have any influence. The predicted sunspot numbers will be 147 on July 5th, 145 on July 6th, 146 on July 7th, 146 on July 8th, and 151 on July 9th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
In Radio Sport this week, more great contests. On July 5th and 6th, the CQ Worldwide VHF Single Sideband CW Contest. That's CW and phone. July 5th and 6th as well, the Marconi Memorial HF Contest, CW. July 7th, the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, CW. July 8th, the DARC Riddy Sprint, that's digital. July 9th, the A1 Club AWT, CW. July 11th, a couple of events, the QRP Fox Hunt, that's CW, and the NCCC FT4 Sprint, that is digital. July 12th, the 13 IARU HF World Championship, CW and phone. July 14th, the 4 States QRP Group Second Sunday Sprint, CW and phone. July 15th, the ICWC Medium Speed Test, that's CW. July 16th, the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, single sideband and phone. And July 18th, the NCCC FT4 Sprint digital. Also on July 18th, the weekly Riddy Sprint, that is digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions. It's the Story Valley Amateur Radio Club Hamfest hosting the ARRL North Carolina Section Convention. That's on July 12th. July 13th, the Sussex, New Jersey Hamfest hosting the ARRL Hudson Division Convention. July 26th, the ARRL West Virginia State Convention and Hamfest. That's in Sutton, West Virginia. And on August 2nd, the ARRL Maine State Convention and Hamfest. That's in Augusta, Maine. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
De-expeditioners heading to Micronesia, Equatorial Guinea, and Wallis Island are getting a financial boost from the Northern California DX Foundation. The 9-member team of German operators planning the V6D de-expedition to Micronesia in September has been named as one of the latest recipients of grant money to assist their activation. The team has scheduled operations from September 22nd through to October 6th. The Foundation is also supporting the 3 C2MD de-expedition to Bioko Island in Equatorial Guinea. The operators are from the Mediterranean DX Club, which has planned their activation from October 9th through to November 10th. Finally, Hannah Rosenfeld, W7HER, has received a grant for her role as an operator on the FW5K de-expedition to Wallis Island in the South Pacific. The participating de-expeditioners, including Hannah's father, Scott, N7JI, are part of the team known as DX Obsessed. Hannah is a founder of W7DUX, the radio club at the University of Oregon where she is an alumna. The de-expedition is set for October 20th through to November 7th. And this quick update, ZL100 IARU is still on the air, in fact until the 31st of July, marking the centenary of the International Amateur Radio Union. A special event QSL card has been printed and confirmation is also on Logbook of the World and QRZ.com. Listen for operators using CW, SSB, and FT8.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air, available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartMedia, and Spotify.
AMSAT UK is delighted to have been able to accept an opportunity to provide a FunCube Lite payload with a Mode UV FM transponder for the exciting Jovian 1 satellite. This 6U CubeSat is being designed and built by Space South Central, which is the largest regional space cluster in the United Kingdom. A collaboration between the universities of Surrey, Portsmouth, and Southampton, Jupiter, the Joint Universities Program for In-Orbit Training, Education, and Research, will equip participants with invaluable hands-on space industry experience and training for their future careers. The FunCube Lite payload for AMSAT UK will collect and send telemetry from Jovian 1 subsystems for educational outreach to schools and colleges using the tried and tested FunCube data format. Telemetry will include data from the payload's own radiation sensor, along with GPS information gathered from the satellite's CAN bus. These data can be used to map radiation throughout the orbit, identifying planetary radiation hotspots such as the polar regions and the South Atlantic anomaly. It will also give an accurate measure of how much radiation reaches the sensitive electronics within the satellite. While Jovian 1 and its ground station at Surrey University will use the commercial S and X band for primary communication, FunCube Lite will use frequencies in the amateur UHF and VHF spectrum. When not sending telemetry, the payload can be configured as a mode UV-FM voice transponder for amateurs to use for international communications. In addition, Jovian 1 will be a testbed for a new technology to reduce the impact of low Earth orbit satellites on astronomy. A new partnership between Surrey Nanosystems and the University of Surrey is aiming to tackle what has become a major concern for astronomers worldwide. They are working on using Surrey Nanosystems' newest product, Vantablack 310, which is a super black coating. When Vantablack 310 is applied to a surface, it reflects only 2% of incoming light, meaning it absorbs the remaining 98%. This high level of light absorption makes the coated surfaces appear extremely dark, helping to minimize the unwanted brightness from satellites that can disrupt the work of stargazers. More than 8,000 LEO satellites already orbit Earth, and projections estimate a rise to 60,000 by 2030, partly driven by the development of mega constellations. To combat this problem, satellite operators have begun experimenting with mitigation strategies, including dark coatings and changes to satellite position, though the negative impact on ground-based measurement persists. Surrey Nanosystems, with a heritage in ultra-black technologies, says their new solution, Vantablack 310, is a handleable, customer-applied coating resistant to the challenging LEO environment. The technology will have its first on-orbit trial on the Jovian 1 mission, scheduled to launch in 2026. One side of the CubeSat will be coated with the material so that reflection and temperature measurements can be compared. More information will be provided at the AMSAT UK Colloquium, taking place during the weekend of October 11th and 12th, 2025, in Milton Keynes, UK.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. And this week we begin with news of yet another successful launch of satellites for Amazon's new Kuiper satellite to Earth Internet service. On June 23, 2025, United Launch Alliance successfully launched its Atlas V rocket carrying Amazon's second batch of 27 Project Kuiper satellites into low Earth orbit from Cape Canaveral. This mission, dubbed Kuiper 2, was the second production batch toward Amazon's plan for a 3,200-plus satellite constellation providing global Internet service. The launch followed a previous scrub due to a nitrogen purge issue and lifted off at 10:54 UTC after a smooth countdown and favorable weather. Amazon faces an FCC deadline to have half its first-generation constellation operational by July 2026, and has secured launches with multiple providers including ULA, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Arianespace. With 6 more Atlas V launches booked and many Vulcan, Ariane 6, New Glenn, and Falcon 9 flights planned, Amazon aims to accelerate deployment to meet regulatory requirements. This second successful launch brings the total number of Kuiper satellites on orbit to 54, underscoring Amazon's push to establish a steady launch cadence. Next, we find that a new study has revealed that the May 2024 Gannon solar storm caused GPS signals to be off by up to 70 meters, severely impacting farmers who lost over $500 million due to malfunctioning GPS-guided machinery during peak planting season. The storm, the most powerful in 20 years, created widespread ionospheric turbulence that distorted GPS signals for up to 2 days and produced stunning auroras visible as far south as Mexico and Spain. Boston University researchers used a network of fixed GPS receivers originally intended for tectonic studies to measure the disturbances, uncovering a massive wall of ionospheric plasma that threw off positioning data across North America. This GPS disruption affected not only agriculture, but also aviation, exceeding the safety margin for altitude precisions during landings. Experts warned that this storm was mild compared to a potential Carrington-level event, which could cause even more severe global consequences. Scientists suggest that real-time ionospheric monitoring and AI-based signal correction could help mitigate such risk in future storms. And finally this week, Mexico's president has threatened legal action over debris from a recent SpaceX rocket explosion near the U.S.-Mexico border. President Sheinbaum said the government is investigating potential violations of international law due to environmental contamination. The explosion occurred during a ground test of a SpaceX Starship at its Starbase facility in Texas, sending a large fireball into the sky. Mexican officials are now conducting a comprehensive environmental review focused on the nearby state of Tamaulipas. This comes after the U.S. FAA approved an increase in annual Starship launches from 5 to 25, despite warnings from conservation groups about threats to wildlife. Sheinbaum emphasized that any resulting lawsuit would be based on scientific findings and legal analysis. If filed, the lawsuit would follow another recent case in which Mexico sued Google over the labeling of the Gulf of Mexico.
Just as the United States prepares to take the International Space Station out of service in 2030, the space agency Roscosmos plans to launch the first modules for its Russian orbital station, the world's first drone platform space station employing robot maintenance. The move also marks the end of international collaboration in space between NASA and Roscosmos. The Russian space agency is eyeing a 2027 launch for the first segment of its space station, the Scientific and Power Module, as the station enters a near-polar orbit. The full transition to the Russian orbital station is expected to be completed by 2030, just as the ISS awaits decommissioning. Other modules are also set for launch in 2030, including the Gateway, the Universal Node and Base modules. Roscosmos expects the spacecraft to establish several stable communication channels by 2030, as the number of communication devices increases over the years. Roscosmos views the space station as a permanent fixture for Russia's space activities well outside of Earth's orbit.
ARRL, the National Association of Amateur Radio, has returned Logbook of the World to service at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. We are happy to be bringing the upgraded LOTW servers online, as we know radio amateurs around the world rely on LOTW to receive QSLs and apply for awards. The improvements we've made will make no change in the visual appearance of LOTW, but will provide enhanced performance and continued reliability of the system. Logbook of the World is a web access database and repository that enables you to submit electronic logs for amateur radio contacts and for confirmation. Users can view submitted QSOs and resulting QSLs online. Radio amateurs can use LOTW to track their progress toward achievements and awards such as the ARRL Worked All States Award and Amateur Radio's Premier Award, the XCC, in which membership is achieved by confirming on-the-air contacts with 100 countries. LOTW was introduced by the ARRL in 2003. Today, over 2.1 billion QSO records have been entered into the system.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Youngsters on the Air, also known this year as Yoda France, is getting ready for its 13th edition. The camp will be taking place at the Château de Janville near Paris from the 18th through to the 25th of August. It is being hosted by the French National Amateur Radio Society, Réseau des Amateurs Français, or REF. Although the camp serves primarily youngsters from throughout International Amateur Radio Union Region 1, guest campers will be welcomed from Regions 2 and 3. About 100 young amateurs attend these camps each year, participating as teams representing their countries. Previous YOTA summer camps have been held in such countries as Chechnya, Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, South Africa, and Great Britain.
AMSAT South Africa has announced that the 2025 Space Symposium will take place on Saturday, August 2nd, 2025, from 800 UTC to 1400 UTC, and has issued a call for papers. The theme of this year's event is Embracing 68 Years of Space Science and Innovation in Amateur Radio. Papers are invited on all aspects of space science and communication that impact or enhance the amateur radio experience, from technical developments to operational practices. Presentations will be approximately 30 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. Proposal submissions in Microsoft Word format should be emailed to admin@amsata.org.za by July 7, 2025. To maximize global participation, the symposium will be held online via the WebEx platform. Attendance is free for members of all AMSAT organizations and national societies, with registration opening on July 9, 2025.
SpaceX successfully launched Axiom Space's fourth private astronaut mission to the International Space Station early June 25th, following a series of technical and scheduling delays. The mission, known as AX-4, lifted off aboard a Falcon 9 rocket from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 0631 UTC. Nearly 10 minutes later, the Crew Dragon capsule separated from the rocket's second stage in low Earth orbit. The rocket's reusable first stage completed a precise landing at Cape Canaveral's Landing Zone 1. After a particularly long orbital chase, 28 hours between launch and rendezvous, the Crew Dragon spacecraft docked with the space station Thursday morning at 10:31 UTC, where it will remain for approximately 2 weeks. The mission adds to SpaceX's growing resume of crewed flights to the orbital outpost, further expanding the role of commercial providers in human spaceflight. Commanding AX-4 is Peggy Whitson, a veteran NASA astronaut making her 5th journey to space. She previously flew on 3 long-duration NASA missions and commanded Axiom's AX-2 mission in 2023. The rest of the crew includes Subhanshu Shukla of India as pilot, and mission specialists Sławomir Wisniewski of Poland and Tibor Kapu of Hungary. All 3 are only the second individuals from their respective countries to reach orbit. The mission experienced multiple delays since its original spring schedule. In February, NASA and SpaceX swapped the original assigned Crew Dragon capsule, Endurance, for a newer vehicle to keep the Crew 10 launch on track. That decision pushed AX-4 into late May, with further postponements in early June due to weather and a liquid oxygen leak in the Falcon 9 booster. Additional delays followed after NASA detected a potential air leak in the ISS's Russian-built Vesta module, prompting further investigation before approving the launch. With clearance granted on June 23rd, the mission moved forward. The AX-4 crew will conduct about 60 scientific experiments during their stay, the most of any Axiom mission to date. This includes joint research efforts between NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization, with Shukla collaborating alongside NASA astronauts aboard the station. AX-4 also marks the first flight of the 5th and final Crew Dragon spacecraft built by SpaceX. In line with tradition, the crew named the new spacecraft upon reaching orbit. Commander Whitson revealed its name, Grace, as it separated from the rocket. Grace is more than a name, she said. It reflects the elegance with which we move through space against the backdrop of Earth, an act of goodwill for the benefit of every human everywhere.
And finally this week, the Senate version of the budget reconciliation bill backed by President Donald Trump removes protections for unlicensed spectrum that broadens the capacity of the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi band. This could result in slower Wi-Fi speeds. Under the bill, the FCC would sell off some of the spectrum to mobile carriers, which could use it to improve the speed of their mobile data. The bill includes a provision that requires the FCC to auction 800 megahertz of spectrum including bands allocated by the FCC in 2020 for unlicensed use. The version of the bill that passed the House excluded the band of the frequencies between 5.925 gigahertz and 7.125 gigahertz, which includes 6 gigahertz. However, there's no such exclusion in the Senate version. The FCC could force to sell off as much as half of the unlicensed spectrum currently in the 6 gigahertz band, according to public knowledge. Senator Cruz, chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, says the new spectrum auction will help prepare carriers for the next wireless leap. However, as recently as this month, AT&T stated that it has no pressing need for additional spectrum. One thing a spectrum auction will do is generate more revenue for the government to offset the tax cuts in the bill. Removing this spectrum from unlicensed use could negatively impact the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi band, which added a huge swath of capacity to Wi-Fi when former FCC Chairman Ajit Pai made 1,200 megahertz of spectrum available for unlicensed use in 2020 during Trump's first term. The 6 gigahertz band is used by Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 to deliver faster speeds over a wider swath of channels, increasing both speed and reliability of Wi-Fi, especially with tri-band routers. The 2.4 gigahertz and even the 5 gigahertz bands are becoming increasingly congested as we rely more and more on Wi-Fi in our homes and businesses. Devices that use 6 gigahertz benefit from a wider, less congested superhighway to travel on, which reduces latency and increases speeds. In a letter to Cruz and other committee members urging them to keep the 6 gigahertz band unlicensed, the Wi-Fi Alliance states that the 6 gigahertz band is the foundation for Wi-Fi's continued development and growth, as well as playing a pivotal role in enabling technologies of the next decade, including artificial intelligence, advancing manufacturing, augmented, and virtual reality. The letter was signed by Apple, HP, Comcast, Amazon, and Meta, among others. Technically, 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi has the same theoretical top speed as 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, 9.6 gigabits per second, the maximum offered under the Wi-Fi 6 standard, the current version of Wi-Fi. You're still not going to get that speed in real life, but the new airwave should help bump your speed up. That's because the limited spectrum available at 5 gigahertz means Wi-Fi signals are often not as large as they could be. At 6 gigahertz, it's assumed that the routers will broadcast at the current maximum allowable channel size, meaning a faster connection. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is in favor of selling off portions of the unlicensed spectrum.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeater systems all around the U.S. and around the world on great operations like WA0RCR from the center of the U.S., Wentzville, Missouri, where This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to be part of the legendary Gateway 160-meter net report each weekend. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.